Hello, family. I'm Dwight,
I'm DeWanda,
and
and
we
we're the
are the Washingtons.
Washingtons.
And I want to thank you for tuning in to another episode of the podcast that we've affectionately entitled Help. And we say that every marriage needs help, which is an acronym for honesty, empathy, love, and patience. Every marriage needs help.
Yeah.
Again, we want to thank you for tuning in today. And as we previously stated, that we don't do this podcast because either my wife or I needed something extra to put on our plates, that we actually want to see marriages flourish. And so, as a result of our wanting to see marriages flourish and a lot of encouragement from people around us who were in our lives, this podcast was born. And so, we want to talk to you today about something that we think is very important, critically important as it relates to marriage, and that is arguing. Um, and of course, we know that probably none of you ever do that in your marriage.
Mhm.
Wink, wink. Uh, but I think there is an effective way to argue that will strengthen your marriage and not cause it to disintegrate. Um, I was reading and preparing for this podcast, honey,
Mhm.
that uh, the statistic is that only 35 to 50% of couples are actually helped through counseling.
Mm.
That most of the time, counseling does not work. And as we have counseled uh, a lot of couples,
Mhm.
um, and kind of look back in retrospect, I was like, well, maybe that
That's right.
that's right.
Mm.
Unfortunately, so I think maybe if we can be proactive on the front end, it'll
Yeah.
save us from having to try to counsel you back into a good relationship.
Mhm.
Um, it is interesting uh, that most couples, I don't think they argue well. I don't think
Mm.
I don't think they
Are you well? Is there such thing?
well, argument arguing if anybody tells you that they don't argue in their relationship,
Mhm.
they're being disingenuous
Um,
because we all argue, but I think it's a matter of arguing the right way,
okay.
um, and coming to maybe not to a total uh, agreement,
Mhm.
but at least you heard what I said. At least I heard what you said. I think
Okay.
that's important because ultimately everybody wants to be heard. I think that one of the reasons why uh, the success rate of counseling is so low
Mhm.
is because most people have already made up their mind what they're going to do
Yeah.
by the time they get to us,
Mhm.
and so we become just another box that they checked off. Like,
Mm.
yeah, we did you get counseling? Yeah, we got counseling. Check.
Okay.
And there was really no intention of implementation, but we can check that
Mhm.
off of our box that we did, in fact, get counseling. So again, today we want to talk about how to argue effectively.
Okay.
I think there is an effective way to argue. So first of all, let's look at arguing as a definition. What does it mean to argue? So according to the dictionary, to argue means to give reasons or cite evidence in support of an idea, an action, or theory, typically with the aim of persuading others to share one's view, or to exchange or express diverging or opposite views, typically in a heated, angry way. And of
Mm.
course, we don't want to do it that second way, but I
Right.
think it's important that we do it that first way, that we give reasons or cite evidence in support of an idea, an action, or theory, typically with the aim of persuading others to share one's view.
Mm.
So we're going to approach it from that way, because we're going to get into in a little bit how you there's a good chance that you're not going to change the other person, that
Mm.
they're going to still have maybe their same viewpoint, but your argument still can be effective. And we're going to talk about that
Okay.
a little bit. We want to start off by making this statement, and you can tell me if you agree with this or not.
Mm-hmm.
All couples argue,
I agree.
that they do argue.
Mm. Now, when you say arguing, are you mean going back and forth, or are you saying we have a disagreement? I'm just voicing my concern. I mean, is that an argument?
Well, I think arguing, if we go by with the definition, it is the definition was uh, when we give reasons
Mm-hmm.
or cite evidence in support of an idea, an action, or theory, typically with the aim of persuading others to share your view. Uh, Again, I think that everybody just ultimately wants to be heard.
Okay.
So the going back and forth, the interaction, uh, because we read two
Mm-hmm.
definitions on arguing. That
Right.
second one was that it said that you exchange or express different or opposing views, but you do it in a heated or angry manner.
Mm.
And I guess
Okay.
that's that second definition
Right.
that we want to try to avoid.
Right.
That we want to, when we have words, we want to discuss, in a calm
Mm-hmm.
manner. So that's what I'm saying. When you're
Okay.
arguing, you're just going back and forth
Right.
in a calm, logical way. You're not, I'm not talking about your mother, and
Mm-hmm.
you're not saying I'm a no good
Right.
so and so.
Mm-hmm.
That's a different level,
Yes.
and usually those end up by you saying some things that you wish you hadn't said. But
Mm-hmm.
I think you said on earlier podcasts, once you put something out there, it's
Can't
out
get
there.
it back.
So we want to try to avoid that.
Right.
We want to try to avoid that. So once we determine that all couples argue, then now we've got to look at what perhaps are reasons for that,
Mm.
and what is the best way for us as married couples to begin to learn how to mitigate, you know, how we argue and navigate our way through that process.
Mm-hmm.
If we all do it,
Yeah.
if we all
If
do
we
it,
all do it.
and I think we agree that all couples
Oh.
argue.
Yeah. I agree.
I know at least one couple does,
Well. Yeah.
and you're looking at it, but we've just
Mm-hmm.
learned how to do it in a respectful way,
Mm-hmm.
where feelings are not hurt, and people are not packing their bags and
Right.
throwing furniture and dishes, and just going to, next level foolishness.
Mm-hmm.
So we've always been able to avoid that. So I want to look at a couple of things. Uh, I don't think that arguing is the real problem.
Mm.
I think the real problem is how we argue.
Okay.
What we say during those arguments. You know, uh, Arguments should be logical,
Mm-hmm.
and if we keep them logical, um, everybody will usually, try to remain calm
Mm-hmm.
and present their particular point of view. But many times we allow our emotions to get into an argument, and then once emotions get into it, then all bets are off,
Right.
because now, like I said, we're talking about moms and dads,
Mm-mm.
and then telling you those babies are not yours, and
Right. Okay.
it just takes, when we tap into the emotional part, then
Mm-hmm.
it gets crazy. But I think if we can keep everything logical, and this is your point of view,
Mm-hmm.
this is my point of view, and let's talk about that. Let's have a discussion about it. Um, I think that's the way to do it.
Mm.
I think that's the way to do it. And if we get emotional, it goes downhill, and
Yeah.
before you know it, you're saying things that are hurtful and nasty and mean.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, there was a psychologist. Uh, that says that many arguments get stuck in the spin cycle.
Mm.
And what she meant by that was that once you take logic out of it and you
Mhm.
just begin to approach it from an emotional standpoint,
Mhm.
you're just going around and around and around,
Right.
and there's no real resolution. We're just going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I'm going to get the last word.
Yeah.
No, I'm going to get the last word, and so she calls it being stuck in
Cycle.
the spin cycle.
Okay.
And in our house, normally, if everything is the way it should be,
Mhm.
then washing the clothes is a part of my responsibilities.
Yes.
And every now and again, I get behind, and
Mhm.
you'll pitch in
I do.
and and critique because you know when I started off doing what that was my responsibility,
Right.
I would just grab a load
Of
and
clothes.
just
Like, what are you doing?
throw them in there. And
Yeah.
so then you critique me and you said you're supposed to separate
Mhm.
the white from the colored.
Did I give you a lesson on it?
I didn't take it as a
You didn't
lesson,
take it
but
as a
I think I
lesson,
was feeling some kind of
but you
way
got
because
schooled though.
I was like, well, I said it in my mind, but I didn't say it to you.
What you say?
Well, you just do it yourself.
Whatever. You better get these clothes washed.
So, you know, but once that's what your emotional brain would say,
Mhm.
but your logical brain would say, look, she's
Don't
just
say
trying to
it.
help you.
Yeah. Don't say
Don't don't say it because
it.
if you say that, then she's gonna be feeling some kind of way. So
And she gonna
just
say
take what she
something.
said because she's gonna say something.
Yeah, I'm going.
Because those of you who are watching our podcast, if you know my wife, she is not one of these weak women that whatever you say is going to go. She is going to give you her 2 cents. And if you say something about that, she'll give you two more and two more.
Whatever.
Before long, she's giving you a whole dollar that you didn't even ask for. So just,
Whatever.
I've learned with you just to
Mhm.
kind of, okay, if that's what you want, just and go along with it. Uh, but that's how we roll.
Mhm.
And that's how I think we're able to avoid a lot of conflicts because what you got to understand about arguing is that most of the time, and I was reading the statistic again. I'm big on
Yeah,
statistics
you reading me.
that
Okay.
70% of the time people argue, they are not going to change the other person's mind. What do you think about
Wow.
that?
Okay.
That literally almost 3/4 of the time you argue, you're not going to change the other person's mind.
You not?
Right.
Mm.
So if your goal in an argument is to change my mind, it's probably not going to happen.
Well, I just want you to see it the way I see it. Is
Well,
that
that's
changing
that's
your
that's
mind?
changing my mind,
You,
and more than likely, you're not going to change my mind. So if that's your goal when we argue,
mhm.
if that's your goal of changing my mind, then you're probably not going to do that. You're not going to change my mind because I'm still going to pretty much have the same idea that I had. So I think more so than anything,
Mhm.
I just need you to hear me.
Okay.
I need you to hear what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
sometimes if you think about what the other person is saying, it makes sense.
Hmm.
Go back to the example of separating the color
Clothes
clothes
and the white
from the
clothes.
white clothes. To
Mhm.
me, like as long as they get clean, as long as water touches them, we should be good.
Mm-mm.
But you brought to my attention
Mhm.
that sometimes color clothes bleed.
Mhm.
Now I can either, you know, I'm still not totally convinced
Mm.
that that's the case,
As you sort them out.
but now I sort them out
Right.
because ultimately it wasn't that big of a deal.
Right. Yeah.
So did you change my mind? Yeah, I think about it now,
You do.
but I'm not sure that you actually
J-
changed my
You
mind.
just went with the
I
flow.
just said, you know what, this is not worth us
Yeah.
arguing about.
Right. Because in the beginning of marriage, had you not got it right, then you would
So
hear me.
yeah,
And then
you
I'll be
you
like, okay, oh, never mind. I'll do it myself.
And then, and then if I get in my feelings, I say, well,
Mhm.
go ahead and do it.
Well, I will.
You
I'll
know,
just get it. I'll get it done myself.
and then here we go.
Yeah, and then never mind. I ain't doing it at all.
Yeah,
Then you got mountains of clothes in the house.
yeah,
Retarded.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
So just we understand,
Mhm.
that, you know, sometimes people just want to be heard.
Yeah.
Like, I just want you to hear.
That's
I want you to
nice.
hear my point of view.
Mhm.
I want you to hear me say that if you don't separate those out, the color clothes are going to bleed onto the white.
Yeah.
And then I hear what you're saying. I process it.
Mhm.
And if it's something that makes sense, that makes sense. But I'm
Mhm.
not totally convinced it's
Okay.
accurate,
Right.
because for a few several washes, I
Right.
wash
You
colored
did.
in,
You did.
and
Like
I didn't see where any clothes were.
bleeding on, but
Yeah.
yeah, but in my mind, I was saying, okay, so he's not gonna follow instructions, right?
Most
Shall
differences.
I repeat
Yeah.
myself?
Well, you know, you did, and
Probably.
I processed it, and it made sense.
Okay.
Usually, when you and I have conversations, I
Hmm.
end up being the most logical
Really?
one.
You think so?
Hallelujah.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's your story. You stick
but
with
yeah,
it.
I mean, the way my brain works.
Mhm.
I
Okay.
just I thought, and I tell married couples this, because usually the man,
Mhm.
he wants to out out articulate you,
Mhm.
right? He
Okay.
wants to he wants to throw all these words out at you, like,
Mhm. Like.
and we want to argue from a logical point of view,
Mhm.
which makes sense to me.
Okay.
But sometimes, like, you don't necessarily argue from a logical point of view.
I'll argue.
Well, some things you
Watch
say,
yourself. Watch it.
some
Okay.
things you say,
Mhm.
like, in my mind, you like, that doesn't make sense. So how do I respond to that? You know what I mean?
Well,
How do I respond to
mhm.
something that's in my mind?
Don't make
It
sense.
didn't even make sense. That was your argument. So it's like, okay, well,
Go
I,
with
I can
it.
see I can see obviously that we're not going to argue logically. We're just going to throw stuff on the wall and see
Okay.
if I can get the other person to bite. I mean, that's just
Hey,
honest. That's
okay.
just I'm just being honest.
That's good.
Uh,
Hey.
but ultimately, I understand, and we understand
Mhm.
that a lot of times what we're arguing about, when you really think about it,
Mhm.
it's not even worth it.
Yeah.
Most of the things that people argue about, most of our differences are personality and lifestyle preferences.
Mhm. Which
When
means.
we were looking at uh, when we were looking at a house,
Mhm.
and I really like big porches.
Yes.
You The porch doesn't matter because you're going to do something different on the inside. So
Mhm.
the inside, what you're working with,
Mhm.
was more important to you.
Right.
So then you ask yourself the question, which one of us is wrong?
Mhm.
Neither one of us is wrong.
Right.
It's just a personal preference.
Mhm.
And so many times we find people end up arguing over personal preference things.
That's nice.
So,
Okay.
you know, I'm not wrong and you're not wrong. It's just a personal preference.
Mhm.
You know, you might like a blue car, I might like a red car. Which one of us is wrong? Neither one of
Neither
us is
one.
wrong.
Right.
It's just personal preference. And if you're going to argue about personal preference things, you're going to always be arguing,
Mhm.
because we see things differently,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, uh, I was just thinking about what we were going to talk about today. Um, Research always shows, because some people say, well, you know, their their way the way they solve this arguing
Mhm.
problem is, they say, we're not going to argue,
Mm.
and that's really not an option,
Right.
because all couples argue.
Yeah.
But there's a small group that says we're not going to argue, and researchers have shown that couples that, I wrote it down. It says husbands and wives who do not argue when dating are doing the early years of their marriage will end up in divorce.
Wow.
Because I guess the research shows that most of the time, if you're not arguing, you're holding it in.
Yeah. That's bad.
So do you think it's a good thing to let things out?
Yeah. Do
You
you?
Yeah, of
Okay.
course. Of course.
Mm-hmm.
We got to remember that ultimately we're on the same team.
Yeah.
We got the same goal
Mm-hmm.
for a successful marriage,
Mm-hmm.
but many times we just have different thoughts on how to make that happen. And it doesn't make me right and you wrong or vice versa. We just process things differently.
Right.
And if I'm getting you to try to process things like I do, we're going to always be arguing. And if vice versa, if you're trying to get me to process things like you do, it's going to always be arguing. And once we come to the conclusion that there are just some things that we won't do the same way, then I think that helps the relationship. That helps the relationship.
Okay, I agree.
Things that we do typically during an argument and why it doesn't work. Let's talk about that.
Okay.
Things that we do during an argument that people typically do that doesn't work.
Like what?
So the first thing that we had was during an argument, people many times will raise their voice. They'll start yelling.
Yeah, because the other person is not listening or talking over them.
So before I go any further with that, how does that make you feel
When
if somebody yells at you in whatever context? We're talking about relationships, but I think in any context,
yeah.
if somebody argues with you, you're going to immediately get an attitude.
Oh yeah, and don't yell at me. Anybody yell at me, then what you sow, you gonna reap it back. Yeah,
it's gonna be a bad move.
Yeah, because you don't yell at people.
It's about respect, being respectful.
Right.
So why do we do it? We do it to make sure that our points and our feelings are heard, to get our frustrations across, or to vent anger. Now let's look at why it doesn't work.
Okay.
Yelling can make us sound intimidating or out of control and distract from the point that we're trying to make. So what should we do instead?
Talk calmly. It's just really hard to do.
Psychologists say if you find yourself starting to raise your voice, take a moment, step back, and take a deep breath, and then lower your voice to a normal speaking voice.
Yeah. Okay. See, honey, you should have.
You just got to say it sweeter.
Let's see, honey. What you should have done was sort the clothes correctly. You did a great job.
But that doesn't sound sincere. That just sounds as
because most people, to lower their voice is not going to be sincere. It's like, you up here, I ain't coming back down. It's up here, I'm gone. If you take a person up here, they ain't coming back down.
So you think it's best to try to avoid going to that place?
Yeah.
Because once you do,
I can't come back down. I'm not going to. I'm up here now.
Well, you over the years, I've learned some things about you that I know that are triggers for you, and hopefully you've learned some things that are triggers. I know for you, a trigger is
what?
Watching you work.
Yeah, don't stand over me. Don't stand over me. Watch me work.
Like if you're gonna give my wife an assignment, you better give it to her and leave. Because if you stand there and watch her, she's gonna work for a minute. Then she's gonna look at you and say, "Can I help you?"
What we doing? You need something?
I think you were doing something the other day, and I was just standing there.
I was cooking or something in the kitchen.
I don't
and you
remember
was
what it
standing over
was.
me.
And he's like, "Can I help you?"
You want to eat
What do you mean?
today?
Can you help me? It's like, I live here, ma'am. I can stand in the kitchen if I so choose to.
Well,
But I know that you and if you're watching this podcast, and I'm trying to give I'm hooking you to some game that my wife does not like when you give her an assignment and stand over her. That will that will you talk about getting yourself in trouble. You stand over her while you when you giving her an assignment. You remember that one guy you used to work for, uh, that he gave you an assignment and then he stood over you, and then
he wanted me to type
he wanted you to type,
up a letter.
and then when you got done, he wanted to measure.
Like, you measuring my paper, my margins, and I know how to type.
I remember that.
know you're not getting.
I remember
he
that.
had a ruler in his hand.
He had a ruler in his hand.
And
you tell
measured my margins. What?
I remember that day like it was
Honey,
yesterday. You called me and said,
"Come and get me.
Come get me."
I quit.
I quit. And he was gone to lunch, and you locked the door and threw the key up under the door.
Yeah.
And locked the door. And
you're not getting ready to stand up over me and measure my paper. I don't think you left a note
or anything.
I'm gone.
But yeah, that is a trigger. That's a trigger for you. So if you're watching, people of God, if you're watching, please don't stand over my wife when you tell her to do something, because that is a trigger for. I don't know what happened when she was a child. I don't know what happened, but that is a trigger, and your girl will get you set straight if you stand over her. So we're talking about things that people typically do in an argument, or doing an argument that we shouldn't do. So we talked about raising your voice, using sarcasm.
Yeah, that gets people.
Why we do it. The psychologist says when faced with something illogical or frustrating, it can be easier to be sarcastic than to engage.
Okay. Yeah.
That never happens, does it?
Right. I can see that.
Why it doesn't work. Psychologist says that doesn't work because depending on the situation, a sarcastic tone makes it sound either like you're making fun of the other person or just not taking things seriously. What should you do instead? Figure out why you want to use sarcasm and address that problem instead. If the other person sounds completely illogical, try to get to the root of what they are saying, or ask them to state it another way.
Like, can you explain yourself? in an argument, you want me to say that? Can you explain yourself, what you're saying?
Yeah. Well, they're saying sarcasm doesn't work. And I think we've all used sarcasm. And then psychologists say another thing that couples do is they'll start with the silent treatment.
Yeah.
Why do we do it? They say, similar to sarcasm, it can be easier to just shut down than face a confusing or frustrating argument. Why it doesn't work. If you're silent, the other person won't know your opinion and might not even know that you disagree. Right. Alternatively, if you go quiet in the middle of an argument, it can seem like you aren't paying attention. So have you? I don't think usually you do this. Usually you don't do the silent treatment thing.
No, I don't.
But I know, I can tell. You can kind of tell with me when we're upset about something.
Yeah.
And sometimes you gotta let people just let them
cool
process
off.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then come back to it.
Yeah.
Does that help with you?
I mean,
sometimes.
I don't know if I have to cool off or anything because I've already voiced what I had to say.
Well, you can't say I'm going to cool off after you got your after you got your point across. Wait a minute, ma'am, I got something to say too. Like you get your point across. Now I want to go cool off. Like no, you cannot cool off after you just bless me out in the name of Jesus. So you gotta everybody. It's timing. Timing is a big thing that couples don't understand. There's some things that you need to address, but now is not the right time.
Yeah, like leave it alone.
Leave it alone
Just
right
be
now.
quiet.
And
Don't
that
say no
comes
more.
right.
Yeah.
That comes from knowing each other.
Yeah.
Like I know, this is probably not a good time.
Mm-hmm.
I'll come back
Yeah.
at a later date and we'll revisit it. We gotta try to navigate through it,
Right.
but we gotta do it at the proper time.
Yep. And I always say, know your clientele. Your spouse is your client. You got to know them. You got to know them.
You gotta know.
Yeah.
So what do you know? Do you know something that frustrates me?
Mm.
It's not
Like
much.
when I had the sweets in the house. When I had the sweets, or
I wasn't frustrated. I just asked a question.
you asked, "Where's those
I,
cookies at?"
I, I just asked where the cookies
You
were.
said, "Where's those
I
cookies?"
wasn't frustrated. I just asked a question.
Well, you was walking, and then you turned
I
around.
was walking to and fro.
You said,
Thinking
"Where's
where
those cookies that we had the other day?" I said, "I put them in the freezer, out in the garage, so you wouldn't look at them and want them."
well, then it's on me
Mm-hmm.
to
Come back and say,
it's on me to look at that two ways
"Yeah,
because everything can be looked at least two ways.
yeah,
The first way I can look at it is okay, she's concerned about our health
mm-hmm,
and our eating habits,
yeah,
and we've been trying to cut down on sweets.
mm-hmm,
So she put the cookies in the freezer in the garage
mm-hmm,
so that sometimes we eat out of convenience. So
yes,
it is not as convenient. So the cookies are in the garage.
mm-hmm,
So if I want a cookie now, I would have
mm-hmm,
to go in the garage, dig in the freezer,
mm-hmm,
then bring the cookie back in,
mm-hmm."
pop it in the oven or the microwave, and then eat it.
Right.
And I don't want to go through that trouble.
Yeah.
So that's one way of looking at it. That's
Right.
the right way. I think that's the way you meant it.
That's how I meant it.
The
Yeah.
second way I can look at it is she's just trying to irritate me because she moved the cookies because she knew I was going to get two of them when I passed back by those cookies.
But you had already ate two already. So yeah, let me put these cookies up.
So,
Yeah.
sometimes, once something has occurred,
Mm-hmm.
then it depends on how I look at it. That's going to determine how I respond to it.
Mm-hmm.
So I just looked at it the first way that she's watching out for our health, and we
Mm-hmm.
both been trying to eat better. So she put the cookie
In the freezer.
in the
Or I
freezer.
could have just put them up and didn't tell you because you asked where they at.
Yeah.
And I could have just said they're not on the counter no more.
Well, I wouldn't have just went for that.
I mean,
You would have to explain a little bit more.
I mean, but it's a choice. I didn't have to say. I wouldn't even have to say nothing else if I didn't want to. They gone bye-bye.
Okay. So silence doesn't work
Mm-hmm.
because the other person doesn't know. They can't read minds. They don't know what you're thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Then they say this perhaps is my favorite one.
Mm.
They say another thing that couples do during an argument that you shouldn't do is they called it reaching.
Mm.
They called it reaching. It says once you start arguing, it can be tempting to reach back to find other annoyances, grievances, and past issues that happened
way back or
a while
before.
ago.
Yeah.
They call that reaching.
I call it by the way.
Yeah.
And by the way.
But when it talked about reaching, I immediately thought about you.
Did you?
I did.
Because why? Because why you think about me?
Because your memory is so very strategic.
Okay. Whatever.
like you'll bring up something that I forgot about, and I'm like, wait a minute, that's not even fair. That doesn't even have anything.
I just thought about it
to do with what
we're talking about.
What we're talking about right now. And I do it too. I think all couples do it.
Yeah.
And I think if you're watching us, you have been guilty of the same thing where you reach back to something that has absolutely nothing to do with what we're talking about right now.
Right.
But sometimes that's a way of because the other person has what in your mind they've cornered you, and what
Come
they're
out.
saying makes absolute sense. But instead
I
of
gotta say
agreeing with them, I
something.
gotta dig something back
Something
out
back.
that happened 5 years ago. You
Yeah.
remember,
And by the way,
I let
when you sorted those clothes out the first time, you messed up my outfit.
well that's never happened because I'm not convinced that washing color clothes and white clothes do any damage to the white clothes.
Well,
So that's never
give me
happened.
that notepad so I can say, and statistics say.
But yeah, it's people have a tendency to reach back, and that's one of the no-nos of arguing. When you reach back into something that happened, you know, a year or two down,
Right.
or some months back that happened, and now I'm going to bring that back up. I'm going to revisit that, and all that does is it like throws fuel on the fire.
Yeah.
So we were already having a disagreement. We were already arguing, and now to make matters worse, you're going to bring something up that I thought we had, you know, just we were worked past that. But you're like, no, I was just waiting for an opportunity to bring it back up. So reaching is, I think, is a big one.
Wow.
And a lot of the couples that we counsel, as they talk to us, I know that reaching is a big thing.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I want to bring something back up. Why? Because I think I'm losing this argument. So I'm going to bring this back up, and I'm going to throw something else in the mix that we're not even talking about.
Yeah.
So I can get back on the winning side of my argument. Now, the reason why you're going to let this pass, because I remember 2 years ago. You remember 2 years ago, and we talked to such and such and such, and I let it go. So then, how come you can't let this go?
Yeah.
Because I let this go 2 years ago.
Yeah.
This is not. It's
like,
not
score
even.
one.
It's
Keeping
not even
points.
the same thing.
Yeah.
It's not even the same thing. But we do that. I think that's probably, out of all the things that they talked about, they thought reaching. I thought was the one that all of us have been guilty of.
Yeah.
Then they talked about hyperbole, using hyperbole. Why we do it. When we're upset, it can be tempting to emphasize the situation by using strong phrases like "you always" or "you never do such and such." Those are hyperbole situations because it's really not true. Like, you never appreciate when I wash the clothes because I don't split them out or sort them out like you want me to. Well, that's not true.
Right.
Matter of fact, you were very appreciative, especially, because I was on top of it.
You the man.
I was on top of that clothes washing.
You was good.
So, and it's, to me, I looked at it as a to being able to keep up with the clothes washing, to me, was a big deal.
Yeah, it is a big deal. Good job.
So honestly, when you told me that, I need to separate the whites from the colors, it was a little hurtful.
Well, so sorry, but you did do it, so I appreciate that.
But how do I do now?
You do really well. Really well. I appreciate it. Takes the load off of me.
I see what you did right there. I see what you did right there. You're so clever. That's what I love about you. You're clever. So, I think a lot of these things that we've seen, or that we've talked about, we've seen it all.
Yeah.
In marriages, and I think, again, that I think I said this on several episodes ago. Most of marital problems that we encounter are not big problems at all.
Right.
It's just one party or the other is just being a baby, just being immature, and not really processing what the other person is saying. If you really realize that you guys are both on the same team,
right,
you got the same goal. So, taking what you said in consideration, and a lot of times you say stuff, and once I process it, once I get out of my feelings, it makes absolute sense. It makes absolute sense. It's just a matter of being receptive to what the other person has said
Yeah.
and processing it and just understanding that, again, we're on the same team.
Yeah.
You are not my enemy.
Right.
I am not your
That's
enemy.
good. That's good.
I am working hopefully towards the same goal that you are.
Mm-hmm.
We simply go about it. We simply process it different ways.
Okay.
So once we understood that, it made, I think it was a turning point in our marriage. We never argued a lot.
No.
Uh, and when we do, normally uh, it's because you are not happy about something.
Okay.
And so then we go back and forth. And I just discovered that, you know, once I process what you're saying,
Mm-hmm.
you do have a valid point.
Thank you. I
So,
thought that too.
so, and as we said earlier, most of the things are personal preference things.
Mm-hmm.
So we're taking a personal preference situation and we're trying to make one party wrong or right over the other party.
Yeah.
So, you know, you bought vanilla ice cream and I bought strawberry.
Mm-hmm.
Which one of us is wrong? It's a personal preference
Right.
thing. I like, you know, a porch on the house. It doesn't matter to you.
Right.
Which one of us is wrong?
Mm-hmm.
We're neither one of us. It's a personal preference
Mm-hmm.
thing. So once people understand that many of our arguments are about personal preference things,
yeah,
and we can always argue. You said you couldn't think of something that irritates me.
Well,
That you do.
You gonna tell me?
Let me tell you.
Yeah, go ahead. It might not change, but go ahead and tell me.
So, so my wife, if you're
Don't
watching,
say it like you telling on me.
I'm just bringing something to your attention
Okay.
because
Well,
I've told you this before.
mm-hmm.
So this is not, I'm not like throwing a gotcha on you,
Right. Okay.
but you have a tendency
What to do? What?
to try to tell me
Mm-hmm.
how to drive.
Drive correct.
So, and then you want to give instructions
Mm-hmm.
like, go this way, turn right here. No, 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 turn. Like, wait a minute. Are you serious right now? And so I always have to remind you that for 30 years I drove for a living. I drove professionally.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't need you to tell me.
And what do I always say? You could have been driving 30 years wrong, so that don't mean nothing to
Right.
me.
But
I appreciate you driving for 30 years.
Yeah, that's a mild irritant to me.
Is it?
And we've talked about that before.
Yeah.
But you won't stop.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out, like,
it won't stop.
Over the years, I just know that if you're sitting on that passenger seat, you sit there and point directions. Like, I remember that one time we were at a stoplight. I had on my right turn signal, and I'll never forget. You said you need to turn right here. I'm like, honey, I got my right turn. What do you think I was going to do? But I was like, she just can't help herself.
Whatever. So
she can't help herself. She's got to give directions. And so now I know that's just.
I'm gonna tell you where to go.
You're gonna tell me how to get there. Like I don't know.
Would you tune me out?
Well, it's like Siri. I just cut you off in my mind. I cut you off, and I just I know because remember I said that they said that almost 70% of the time you're not going to change the other person's viewpoint.
Yeah.
I think that may be a little high, but this is what the psychologists say.
Okay.
Because and the reason for that is much of the things that we're trying to change are personal preference things.
Wow.
Like, I'm gonna always like houses with porches,
You can have that, sweetie.
and you're probably gonna always like what you like.
Yeah.
So,
Whatever you want, honey, you can have it. Okay.
because, but my point is, we got to couples have got to stop. They try their best to stop arguing over personal preference things.
Yeah.
Because when you get
Don't make it a big deal.
When you get done arguing and clean up all the broken furniture, and 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 try to take back and say you're sorry for all the hurtful things you said,
it's out there.
That person is still gonna like what they like.
Yeah.
And you're still gonna like what you like.
That's true.
I'm still gonna like strawberry ice cream. You're still gonna like vanilla. So that's an argument we could have just, because neither, in that case, neither one of us were wrong.
Right.
We just had different opinions.
That's good.
And so I hope that today has been has been enlightening to those of you who watched. Many things we can avoid, and you can have a successful marriage if you just learn how to argue correctly. I want you to see my point. I want to be heard.
Right.
I want you to hear me. And it doesn't mean that you're going to ultimately agree with me, but I just want you to hear me.
Yeah.
And I think people, by and large, they just want to be heard. They just want to know that their opinion means something to you, that you value what they say, you value what they bring to the table, and we're going to move on from this. We're not gonna keep the record where a year from now you're gonna bring it back up.
Right.
We're gonna talk about it. We're gonna argue about it. We're gonna argue about it logically, and then we're gonna move on.
Yeah.
I think that's what helps a marriage be successful. That the couples, that the parties involved, they know how to move on.
That's good.
Once we talk about it, okay, let's just move on now.
Yeah, and choose to be happy.
Happiness, would you say happiness is a choice?
Yeah, choose to be happy. Because life is too short to be sad and mad in your own house.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not that deep.
And I don't know, I don't want to end on a somber note, but I think we have both been mentioning how many people that we know who recently or have heard of or know about have passed away.
Yeah.
And when you finally figure that life is too short to spend it arguing and to spend it unhappy and to spend it in strife, you understand that it's just not worth it.
It's not worth it.
It's not worth it. I want to be happy, and I know we have decided that we want to be happy. So the kids are grown, and it's just us, and we've decided that
you make me happy.
Oh,
you do.
Well, I try my best.
You do. You spoil me.
Yeah.
So you're a good husband.
I try to make you happy. You try to make me happy. We try to make each other happy because life is too short to be miserable.
Yeah.
And
I can't.
Just I say to couples, just grow up. Grow up. Stop getting in your feelings so easily, and just be happy.
Just be happy.
Be happy.
Yeah.
So that's all we got for today, family. I thank you for tuning in. My wife and I really appreciate you. Would you do us a favor? If this was a blessing to you, would you please like and share and help us to get the word out about the podcast? Because like I said, we just want to help marriages to flourish and to thrive. So I'm Dwight.
I'm DeWanda.
And we are the Washingtons. Thank you for tuning in today.